December 30, 2021, the courtroom doors swung shut on a woman whose name had become synonymous with the darkest corners of power, ending a trial that would lay bare a sprawling network of sexual exploitation. Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite once hailed as the girl of the party, stood accused of orchestrating the grooming and trafficking of underage girls for the perverse desires of her late companion, Jeffrey Epstein. The verdict would not only seal her fate but also force a nation to confront the chilling reality of how wealth, influence, and secrecy can shield abhorrent crimes. Born in 1961 to the media magnate Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine grew up surrounded by privilege and a relentless drive to be noticed. She moved to New York in the early 1990s, quickly embedding herself in elite circles, befriending politicians, royalty, and billionaires. It was in this glittering world that she met Jeffrey Epstein, a financier with a penchant for recruiting the rich and powerful to his private islands and exclusive gatherings. Their partnership blossomed into a symbiotic relationship. Epstein provided the financial muscle and access, while Maxwell, with her charisma and connections, became the conduit through which young women were identified, approached, and ultimately entrapped. The modus operandi was disturbingly methodical. Maxwell would scout potential victims, often teenagers from modest backgrounds, through modeling agencies, academic programs, or personal referrals. She cultivated trust, offering promises of scholarships, internships, and a fast track to a glamorous lifestyle. Once the girls were in her orbit, they were flown to Epstein's Manhattan mansion, his private jet, or the infamous private island of Little St. James, where they were coerced into sexual acts with Epstein and his affluent guests. The victims were then threatened with blackmail, isolation, and the promise of ruined reputations, ensuring their silence. When the first wave of allegations surfaced in 2005, a Palm Beach police investigation led to a controversial plea deal that granted Epstein immunity for victims who could not be protected. Maxwell, then a peripheral figure, escaped scrutiny. It would take years of investigative journalism, most notably the relentless reporting by the Miami Herald's Spotlight team, and a cascade of brave survivors stepping forward to reignite the case. In July 2019, Epstein was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking of minors, only to die by suicide weeks later, a death that ignited further conspiracy theories and intensified public demand for accountability. The United States Department of Justice, seizing the moment, charged Maxwell on July 2, 2020, with multiple counts: enticement of a minor, sex trafficking of a minor, and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. The indictment painted a stark picture: a woman who not only facilitated but actively participated in the procurement, transportation, and sexual exploitation of underage girls. Prosecutors presented a damning trove of evidence: flight logs, emails, witness testimonies, and a meticulously documented pattern of behavior that spanned nearly 2 decades. The trial, held in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, unfolded under the relentless gaze of cameras, activists, and a public hungry for justice. Maxwell's defense team pursued a strategy of denial and deflection, arguing that she was a scapegoat, that the evidence was circumstantial, and that the alleged victims were unreliable. They sought to portray Maxwell as a victim herself, caught in Epstein's manipulative web. Yet the prosecution systematically dismantled these narratives, introducing testimony from dozens of survivors who described in harrowing detail how Maxwell had lured them with promises, isolated them, and threatened them into compliance. One particularly striking moment came when a former victim recounted a conversation in which Maxwell whispered, "You're going to be a star, you just have to do this for a little while." The courtroom fell silent as the weight of that manipulation settled over the jurors. For weeks, the nation watched as the prosecution laid out a timeline of flights, hotel receipts, and photographs that linked Maxwell directly to the locations where the abuse occurred. The defense's attempts to sow doubt were met with a cascade of corroborating evidence, turning what could have been a "he said, she said" scenario into an undeniable pattern. After 6 weeks of testimony, closing arguments, and jury deliberations, the verdict arrived on December 29, 2021. Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty on 5 of the 6 charges: sex trafficking of a minor, 2 counts, and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of a minor. The jury's decision reverberated beyond the courtroom, signaling a rare triumph for victims who had long been silenced by fear and intimidation. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in federal prison, a term that reflects both the gravity of her crimes and the broader societal imperative to deter such predatory conduct. The aftermath of the verdict has been a complex tapestry of legal, cultural, and personal ramifications. For the survivors, the conviction offers a measure of validation, yet many continue to grapple with trauma, financial insecurity, and the lingering stigma of their experiences. Advocacy groups have called for further investigations into Epstein's extensive network, urging authorities to pursue any remaining accomplices who may still be operating in the shadows. The case has also spurred legislative proposals aimed at tightening statutes of limitations for sex trafficking offenses and enhancing protections for minors in the modeling and entertainment industries. Internationally, the trial exposed how a web of global elites can exploit jurisdictional loopholes, prompting calls for greater cooperation among law enforcement agencies. Subscribe to The Verdict for more stories like this.